Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of Enforce technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by Enforce technology, only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnagrip.com.
Hello there, and welcome to Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio. In this episode of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department, this is the podcast that is dedicated to our great volunteer fire service and the idea that true professionalism is never defined by any paycheck. In displaying and maintaining and upholding a professional image, a professional reputation is the duty and responsibility of firefighters everywhere. Tom Merrill here. And thank you again for listening in. I really do appreciate it. Never take it for granted. It means a lot to me that you choose to spend some time listening in to me and my guests to talking about things of importance to the fire service. And just a quick note that from my last show from last month regarding the new proposed OSHA standards. I'm sure you're aware that OSHA's been reviewing the old fire brigade standards, proposing some pretty significant changes that's definitely going to affect all departments, not just paid, not just volunteered. All departments are going to be affected. And we talked quite a bit about that last month. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please go back and listen to last month's podcast episode. I have them on my website. They're on my YouTube channel. You can go to Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio. If you Google that, it'll bring up a whole list of their podcasts. And you'll find last month's Professional Volunteer Fire Department on there. But go back and give it a listen and see what this is all about. See what the hype is all about and become educated about these proposed changes. And the reason I wanted to bring it up again is just because the comment period, they are seeking comments from all of us, and that comment period has been extended yet again until July 21st. And that's really good news, but it also means that we all have to get off our butts and put together some well thought out comments and information. And as my guest said on the show last month, this has been reinforced quite a bit. OSHA really does want to hear from us. So we've got to send them some information about how these proposals could affect our department, our agencies, us personally. And OSHA's been pretty clear about that they want to hear from us. And that was what the guest last month, Dave Deniston, talked about. He did such a good job reviewing the standards and maybe what we should be concerned about, and also highlighting, obviously, there's good points to these proposals as well. And Dave Deniston, wow, what an amazing man he is. Matter of fact, just this week, he's on Capitol Hill talking to lawmakers about these proposed standards. And then he flies back home, and then he's running his farm back home, or he's a volunteer firefighter. The man is just everywhere. He doesn't stop. But this is a really important topic. It's a current topic that everyone should be aware of. And so make your thoughts known and get some feedback to OSHA regarding these standards and the impact, again, both good and bad, that they may have on your agency. There's a lot of ways to get information. Just go online, go to the National Volunteer Fire Council website at nvfc.org. I know my local New York State Association of Fire Districts has links and information on it. But if you just go online and Google OSHA Fire Brigade standards or recommended changes to the standards, it'll take you to a whole long list of resources and also give you some information on how to contact OSHA and provide them with your thoughts and your concerns. So enough on that anyway, and let's get on to the show. And again, thank you for being here. And I am so incredibly honored to have my guest here with me today. I'm actually shocked that he has time to spend with me, because every time I see him on social media, he's in another state and he's either presenting somewhere or watching a baseball game, or I think just this week he was in Miami or something, listening to a concert, or I don't know. I can't keep up with him. He's always playing around, but I got him, and I'm so glad to have him. And if you've ever had a chance to sit down on one of his classes, or if you've never read one of his books, then folks, you're missing out. Whether you're volunteer, paid on call, wow, this man has a lot of advice and information and tactical tips and a lot of information that we can all learn from him. He's been there. He's done that. So glad to have him on the podcast, because can't wait to hear what he has to say with us today. So thank you, Chief. And I'm going to do it right. I've been rehearsing. Chief Steve Prziborowski. Did I do it?
Awesome, buddy. Perfect.
Is that close? Did I do it good?
Yes. You rock.
All right. I've been working on that. And, my wife is part Polish. And we have a big Polish contingent here in Western New York. So that shouldn't be hard for me to do. But so thank you for being here with me, Chief. I know you've been in the fire service over 30 years out in the great state of California. And I know you've been an FDIC instructor. You write, you're an international speaker. You go all over the country and all over the world, as I said. And your tagline, Courage Under Fire Leadership, we're going to get into that tonight because I think it's such a great name, too. And we're going to see what that's all about. But thank you for being here and taking the time to join me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to come on my show.
Well, thank you, Chief. I really appreciate the gracious lead in and gracious jumping off board that you provided. So thank you very much. I was fortunate to catch the Rolling Stones out in Florida the other day, and ball game in Denver last night, another concert, and then back home till tomorrow, and then down in Southern California, but back in on Friday. But blessed and fortunate that you made time for me. So thank you. Thank everybody in advance for taking the time to listen today.
And I know we could talk for hours. You've been doing so much. Courage Under Fire Leadership is your signature book, the launching pad for your leadership presentations. Your other classic that I haven't been able to put down yet, 101 Tips to Ace Your Promotional Exam. And, I tell my volunteer friends all the time, when you see the name of that book, it doesn't mean it doesn't apply to you, because I always said when I was chief of my department, when we had new officers or when I had to appoint an officer in the middle of the year, or someone got elected at the end of the year for the next following year, I would call it a promotion. It definitely is a promotion. So the book does apply. There's a lot of great lessons in that book too. And but before we get into your books and some words of wisdom, I always like to start off with letting my listeners hear a little bit about you and tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, what got you into the fire service and got you on this journey that you're here to share with us today.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. Blessed and fortunate to have had a great ride so far. Knock on wood, every day is a great day. I'll start out with, I was born and raised in California. I know you said the great state of California. California has its problems, trust me, especially if you're from here or outside of here. We have our share of problems, politics, cost of living. I totally get it. The weather is awesome. We joke we pay the weather tax. That's why everything is so expensive, because of good weather. But anyway, born and raised out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Was very blessed and fortunate to have a great upbringing, just myself, no brothers and sisters, but a father that worked in law enforcement that exposed me to the fire service, exposed me to sports, and exposed me to music. 3 of my passions still today. And I did the normal route going through high school, always watching the fire engines go by, growing up right next to the city of Oakland, just south there in San Leandro. And I was always visiting firehouses and never taking it seriously. I went through college, got my 4-year degree in 6.5 years. That was a bonus plan, I guess, 6.5 years for a 4-year degree. But anyway, I wasn't sure where I wanted to be. But it wasn't until that point where I was working at Long's Drugstores, which is Stevie S Drugstores bought them out. So marginal retail drug chain. And realizing that's a good job as a manager, but it's not a career. And thankfully, I had some good family friends in the fire service that really kicked me in the butt. And a good friend of mine, Greg Vitz, who's a retired captain out of Stockton, California, that we said, you know what, let's go for it. So we took the time to go straight ahead to become a firefighter. And back in the 90s, it was competitive. I mean, with so many career departments out here, San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose being the 3 big ones, it was a challenge and a half just to be able to get a foot in the door. I mean, it took 4.5 years of testing around the Bay Area before you say, what a loser. It took them 4.5 years to get hired full time. It's like I took about 50 or 60 tests. I was 0 for 30 on lotteries. There was a lottery system out here because of the amount of thousands of candidates. And I remember I was 0 for like 30 on the lottery. So it wasn't truly random if I'm 0 for 30. But thankfully, as I kept plodding away, Santa Clara County Fire offered me a full-time job back in 95. And no looking back, I was very fortunate to do my time as a volunteer firefighter, a part-time firefighter, a fire explorer, a student firefighter, all within those 4.5 years. And then when I got hired full-time, I was, like I said, fortunate to serve as a firefighter engineer with County Fire for about 5.5 years. I was a captain for about 6 years, battalion chief for about 7 years, and then 10 years as a deputy chief. And I retired. I was a deputy chief at the end of 2021. Miss the people. Don't miss the headaches, the politics, the drama that go with being a gold badge in any size department, but especially a big department, 300 plus personnel, 15 firehouses. Great people, great department to this day. But in the last 2 years being retired, I'm just more blessed to be able to continue teaching, continue speaking, more time with my wife. My wife has been married to Bonnie for
Better get this right.
No. I was going to laugh because she never gets this right. So I got my get out card.
Okay.
She's terrible at dates, but I wish we would have got married in 2000. We got married in 99 because 2000 would have been an easy one to remember. So it was 99, so 25 years, but no kids, just the two of us. She's a division chief fire marshal with Alameda County Fire, which is just where Oakland is at. So the next county north of us. She's been on the job for about 27, 28 years. But just the two of us, but very blessed and fortunate to continue doing what I enjoy the most, which is speaking, teaching, writing, spending time with friends and family, hitting rock concerts, hitting ball games, and just enjoying life. But also, but more importantly, being able to still give back to the fire service, and that's really my true passion. When people
You've got a lot to give back. That's for
people always
sure.
ask, "What's my passion?" It's simply put, helping people get hired. Because I still teach the college part-time, the intro to fire class. That's awesome. We got the future firefighters full of piss and vinegar. I still enjoy teaching them, but I enjoy people getting hired, staying hired. And that doesn't matter a career. It could be volunteer, just getting on the job, but also getting promoted and staying promoted, which means not doing stupid stuff, which is where the leadership ties in. Because unfortunately today, in today's world, we see so many people of all ranks from all types of departments from every part of the world getting in trouble for just doing less than stellar stuff that doesn't meet the mission of their organization. So that's sort of been my passion, is the leadership, the officer development, the promotional preparation, and the entry-level stuff. So we could talk for hours, but I want to throw the ball back at you.
That's all right. I was just wondering, you mentioned your father was in law enforcement. How do you feel about you going into the fire side of things?
The old joke today is, what's the difference between a cop and a firefighter? It's like, well, all the cops want to be everyone wants to be a firefighter. But he never wanted to be a firefighter, but he also recognized law enforcement was a good field for him at the time. But he also recognized the fire service was a good field too, and probably had a lot more positives and assets than law enforcement. I mean, no disrespect. I mean, I totally respect what him and everyone else does, but he was the one that actually pushed me toward firefighting, which is great.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I can't believe, you talk about just how it was up until the recent past too, the difficulty getting hired and getting these jobs. And, what a credit to you with the perseverance you showed. 0 for 30 on the lottery, and you stuck with it for over 50 tests. And holy cow, a little different today.
Yeah, people at the time go, what a loser. It's like, no, if a city like Oakland would test and they're going to hire maybe, 100 people over 5 years in the list, there would be 10,000 applicants, or it'd be like, I remember a city of Hayward, which has 7 firehouses, where the college I teach at is just south of Oakland and north of here. I remember that was one of my first tests, Hayward. They had 3 jobs. There was 3,000 of us for 3 jobs. Now in the Bay, especially in the Bay Area, you're not getting thousands of applications. It's usually hundreds if you're lucky for the bigger departments. And then you take away those that aren't qualified, those that can't follow instructions, those that just ghost or don't show up. Yeah, times have sure changed. And it's everywhere, volunteer world, but especially career even today.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe the pendulum will swing back the other way someday, but I'm not seeing it yet, and I don't think you are either. So Well, listen, let's get into your writing. The two books that I do want to talk about, and we talked before the show started recording, that maybe we'll just cover the one book today and have you back on for part two. You were kind enough to send me copies of the books. I did not, I'll be honest, have them on my bookshelf as of yet. I've got quite a collection, and I'm glad to have these two. As I've been reading through them, I haven't been able to put them down. As a matter of fact, I take a lot of notes, and I have sticky notes on things to look at and talk about and digest more. And I get ideas for posts for social media postings, always giving credit to where I got the idea. But I believe your newest book, Courage Under Fire Leadership, that's your signature presentation that you've been doing quite a bit on. I think it leads to a lot of different sub-presentations that you can embark on. But I love that name. And it just came out this year, I think, didn't it? The recent past?
Yeah, Fire Engineering Books just published it mid-April. So it was literally the week before FDIC. So thankfully, the timing was just perfect to get it out of FDIC. And, and leadership has always been my passion. But if you look at, I self-published 3 books about 11 years ago. 2 of them were entry-level getting hired books because there wasn't much of a market out there of entry-level getting hired books. And then a promotional preparation book. And that's always been my passion. And then over the years, as I had more experience writing more articles for fire engineering and doing more speaking, back in 2019, Fire Engineering gave me a contract for my 101 Tips to Ace My Promotional Exam book, which I was just ecstatic to get no longer self-published, but have a big name like Fire Engineering behind me. And then about a year into that, once that was published in 2019, I think 2021, that book was actually published, a couple of years in the making. Then I was able to get the next contract from Fire Engineering for the Courage Under Fire Leadership, which has really been what my passion is. Not that promotional preparation isn't, but when we talk in that next episode about the 100 tips to help you ace your promotional exam, I joke with people that's like a leadership book disguised as a promotional preparation book, because that's what everything is about. Leadership, whether you're a firefighter all the way up to fire chief, any type of organization, it's always about leadership. So the Courage Under Fire Leadership really, I think, sums everything up, as we'll talk about, because I think really takes courage to be a leader, not just in the fire service, but in the world in general for so many reasons.
Sure. And I love what you say in there too. It's about having the courage to do the right thing for the right reason at the right time, ultimately doing what's best to serve the community, the organization, and your personnel. You summed it up so well there. And I think it was right at the beginning too. Was it Chief Richie did your, I think he did your forward, right? And
Chief, our good friend and brother, Frank Ricci from retired New Haven, Connecticut, and Chief, awesome dude. He wrote such a stellar forward. I was just floored when I read that.
Yeah, he did.
And he didn't just put it together. He actually took the time to literally go through and read it and offer great feedback that it helped me adjust it and tie everything in. So very flattered that he was so just gracious.
And right in the foreword, there were 2 things that struck me. And that was the first 2 notes. Here I am in the foreword taking notes already. But there were 2 things that struck me. And one he said was that, you're going to be an officer there. You're going to be responsible for others. And that is quite a weight. And then the other thing that he said that really impacted me, I was like, man, he's so right. And that's so many leaders in the fire service don't see them as leaders beyond the fire ground. In other words, everyone wants to be the leader at the big fire or big emergency incident. They don't realize that there's a lot more that goes into it that has nothing to do with the emergency, and probably far more often to do those things.
Well, yeah, because the emergency scene makes up such a small percentage of most of our time. On the career side, obviously, you're with people 24/7, 365, and even then, emergencies are a small percentage. Volunteer side, again, there's still emergencies to respond to, but there's still all the other stuff that go along with it that you can't just write off. So the the fire ground is the sexy stuff. The firehouse is usually the not so sexy stuff that doesn't get talked about enough. And was really my passion. I mean, while I do talk about fire ground related stuff, because I think there's some stuff I have to offer on that realm, because I, of course, didn't want to leave out the fire ground. So much of what I feel is so important and also so neglected is the administrative related stuff, the firehouse related stuff, the personnel related stuff, the personal related stuff, meaning each one of us, how we can be better for those that we're fortunate to serve and lead.
So true, so true. And you said too in the beginning of the book that, in your opinion, there's a leadership crisis in the fire service, and there's also a followership crisis. Can you discuss that? What did you mean by that?
In a nutshell, it's easy to point fingers, and it's always easier to be the recliner sniper, to quote Andoni Castros, our good friend from us, retired Sac Metro, BC.
We all have those, that's for sure.
Everyone, and I was guilty of that too. Trust me, I got, I think, a PhD in recliner sniping until I was called in the carpet by my wise battalion chief. But anyway, the leadership, Castros talks about it very eloquently about there's a leadership pandemic, which is really true around the world, fire service included. And a lot of us sometimes, it's at the upper echelon ranks of a fire organization, but also in the middle ranks. And I'm not trying to point fingers because every organization is different, but to have successful leadership, you also have to have success for followership. The unfortunate part about today's world is, like, I'm holding up my phone today. Technology, social media, the internet has made it very easy for almost anybody to be a keyboard commando, keyboard terrorist, as it's called, recliner sniper, I guess, and from your keyboard. But it's made it so easy just to talk smack about things. If I was chief, or if I was captain, or if I was the president, if I was the mayor, if I was the city council person, whatever, without really, number one, solutions or realistic solutions. Maybe they do have solutions, or even those people willing to step up and lead and be in that position of, a lot of people sometimes I'll just pick anything. Maybe it's an elected official. Maybe it's a fire chief. Maybe it's a captain. I don't know. Maybe it's just the president, maybe whatever. So many people are quick today to make judgments. That's just human nature. Well, I'm not saying be a blind follower. You can't be sheep per se. You got to have your own independent thinking mechanism. But unfortunately, a lot of people today, they don't understand the part of leadership. Sometimes when a decision is made, and there was no comment period, or the comment period maybe is over. Maybe there was a comment period because it wasn't a heat of the battle decision, like on the fire ground where, chiefs got to make a decision. But maybe it was a day-to-day decision where maybe there was a comment period. Maybe the leader of any rank took input, maybe sorted through it, maybe didn't sort through the input, maybe didn't ask for input. There's different leadership styles. This is where I feel the struggle is the lack of followership, and people will back that up and justify their actions for not following because, well, I don't like him. Look at, whatever, maybe I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican or I don't believe in this person here. It's like, okay, there is no perfect leader out there, no matter who they are in any line of work, any governmental organization, private industry. I'm not saying drink the Kool-Aid, but there comes a point where it's like, you know what, to put your big boy, big girl pants on. And sometimes we have to suck things up. And I think that's where the real struggle is in today, because I think a lot of organizations, industries, governmental agencies, governmental organizations are struggling because they're trying to please too many people. They've got half the audience is saying this, the other half is saying that, and we're only fighting with each other versus trying to move forward. So long answer short, it's to have successful leadership of any type, you need followers. And again, I'm not saying blind followers that just drink the Kool-Aid, but sometimes you have to agree to disagree. And do you want to die on this hill or live to fight another battle? And that's my point. You may not like your fire chief, for example, the fire chief, whatever. Okay, well, he or she is the fire chief. So whether you like him or her doesn't really matter per se. It's not a popularity contest, but they're in the position. So until they're not in the position, if you're not supporting that leader, you're undermining the organization. And that's where we have a lot of sometimes toxic, again, maybe it's at the top, but a lot of times it could be in the middle, because maybe it's the middle folks that don't support the top, whether they agree or disagree, but they end up just undermining things. And I think that sends an unfortunate, terrible message to everybody. And then nobody wins, especially the people when they call 911.
Right, for sure. I heard an expression once: if you're going to be a leader, you develop the habit by being a good follower. If you're going to be a good leader, you got to be a good follower first, and it's so true. And then what happens, right? If they're not a good follower, and then someday they get promoted into that leadership position, now they're wondering. They're mad at the people that aren't the good followers. Like, they weren't a good follower, but now they get mad about it. Like, how can they be like this? Well, maybe you were the same way.
Well, it's like when the chief, we've all probably had those bosses at some point in our careers that, all right, guys, chief just came out with this new policy. I think it's a bunch of BS and everything else. And, whatever, we'll follow it. And their eyes are rolling and just everything else. They're not taking ownership of the message. What message is that sending to their subordinates they're probably going, yep, it's BS. We're not going to do it. Well, okay, I don't agree with every policy that ever came out. I never will, nor should I ever agree with it. But there comes a time where, most of the time in most organizations, labor got together with maybe management or the association or whatever your structure and system is, or maybe just the chief said, this is the new policy. Deal with it.
Right.
Okay, I don't agree with it, but okay, you got to take ownership of it, because then you undermine the total message. And like you said, then you find yourself maybe in that position, and then you wonder why no one's following you. Well, you set the tone.
Exactly.
Especially from the lowest level of leadership, lieutenant, captain.
I love how you broke the book up too. For the listeners out there, we're talking Courage Under Fire Leadership. If you don't have a copy of it, please, we'll talk about how to get a copy. But it's a great read. It's an easy read. No disrespect meant by that either. It's a nice, comfortable read where you can sit in your recliner, and instead of being a recliner sniper, you can get some great words of wisdom. But I like how you broke it down into the different sections. I think there's 6 sections in there: personal, and personnel, fireground, firehouse, administrative, which nobody ever thinks about that. I don't want to do all this paperwork and record keeping. I run into that in my firehouse. And then I like how you took some leadership lessons from others. So, and what you did is you've got a lot of good personal examples of leadership lessons that you've learned along the way, but not all just from the fire service either, right? Your whole journey in life, you've learned lessons that you put into this book.
This is a culmination of a lot of things, a lot of one-liners, because every time I'm speaking teaching a class, having a good discussion in a class, or maybe even sitting as a student, at FDIC and soaking in someone from like yourself or many others, I'm taking notes. I mean, not as diehard as you see, like, Bill Guston. Gotta love the guy from, Florida. Here he is taking notes religiously. I mean, talk about the gold standard of somebody that's still a student in the fire service. But I try my best to try to capture things. And that's what the culmination was. And I tried to break it out into different things. And I don't want anyone that's listening to think, well, I'm just a firefighter. I'm not a leader. Well, guess what? Firefighters are leaders. Whether you believe it or understand it or agree with it, firefighters are leaders, maybe not by rank or qualification, but they are. Everybody also has leadership potential, but also, some of these firefighters that are just starting out new in their career may promote at some point. Who knows if they do or they don't, doesn't matter, but at least they understand, even if you never promote, understand how you fit into the structure. I mean, you may think, oh, if I was fire chief, I'd be doing this. Well, yeah, if you were fire chief, you think you might be doing that, but if you were, you probably wouldn't because of, whatever reasons. That's one of my journeys, is to try to expose people, especially of the lower ranks, some of the challenges of leadership. Maybe I talked them out of becoming a supervisor. Maybe I talked them out of becoming a formal, leadership position, company officer. That, I don't mean that negatively, but I want to expose people what they're getting into, but also make them appreciate what their boss has to deal with, so they don't get pissed off with their boss when their boss has to maybe hold them accountable for some strange reason.
Right. So let's dive into the first chapter, so to speak, the first section on personal leadership. I'd like to take some snippets and share with the viewers some snippets from each of these sections, things we can pass on to them, and hopefully encourage them to get the book so they can dive into it even more. But so your first section's on personal, not personnel, personal leadership, which is things that we individually can control, things we can focus on to improve our knowledge and our skills and abilities to ensure we're being the best we can be. And there's a lot of great examples in there. And I'll start with one, and I'll let you go into any others that you want to share. But you do a great job, and talking about politics And what's so cool about the volunteer world or in that politics is I can't tell you in my travels, in my conversations with volunteer firefighters and former volunteer firefighters, how much they hate politics. That's the reason I quit my firehouse, because of the politics. And I've said it on this show before. Show me an organization that doesn't have politics. Again, my wife was the PTA president back in the day. She was a Girl Scout leader. There's no politics in Girl Scout? Oh, yes, there is. So talk about what your message and your lesson is to anyone that's disgruntled out there about politics, and maybe what they need to do to understand it's there, accept it, and what they can do to get better at working the system.
You know, I one of the pictures I share in class, I think it's a Phoenix firehouse that basically has a sign on the door between the apparatus bay and the firehouse there. And it basically says something to the effect of live your interview, basically meaning remember what you told the fire chief when you were interviewing for the job or the promotion, and try to never forget that. Meaning, think back to that day when most of us were all in front of whatever the oral board was, chief, I'll do everything to be a firefighter or a captain or a chief, and promising the world. Of course, we're here for them. I'm here to serve my team and be a great teammate. And then unfortunately, especially as we all know, at some point on the job, sometimes sooner than later, depending on the size of your organization or how maybe challenged it is, people get disgruntled, people get bitter. I mean, it happens in every line of work. And it's like, the job ain't fun anymore. This BS, like you were talking about at the start of it, the stupid 2 in, 2 out OSHA stuff, blah, blah, blah. They're taking the fun out of the job, blah, blah. And then it's like, those are all distractors. And I can think of thousands of examples. And I think the best message that I was always reminded over the years by those that I looked up to in leadership positions, and sometimes those were same rank people, meaning when I was a firefighter, sometimes it was just another firefighter that would hey, I remember just a senior firefighter, I don't know, maybe they had 20, 25 years in the job, and I had 5 years, and I was that recliner sniper, not even a captain yet, but if I was a captain, I'd be doing this. If I was chief, I'd be doing this. And I remember a wise senior firefighter goes, hey, dude, you ain't a captain. You ain't the chief. How about focusing on the shit that excuse my language, you have control over? You can't control what they have control over, or you're not in their shoes. How about doing what you can, which is keeping your positive attitude, doing your job, smile on your face, giving back to the organization, giving back to the community, and doing all those things you promised. And I think that's that challenge that in any line of work, it doesn't matter where you work, who you work for, private industry, government, big, small, there's always going to be challenges, political challenges, leadership challenges. And I think the best line is always, I wake up in the morning and I can decide if it's going to be a great day or not so great day. And if I wake up in the morning that they're out to get me, or they're out to screw me, or they're out to screw us, blah, blah, it's going to be that negative day versus, you know what? I got no control over what goes on outside of me. And that's why I think personal leadership was the appropriate starting out chapter, because a lot of classes I do, I try to segue a little segment on personal leadership, because instead of pointing the fingers out there, how about focusing on us first, of trying to be the best that we can be before we, leading by example, learning from our mistakes, striving to be better before we try to take on other problems that most of the time we have no control over.
Right. How about worrying about something you can definitely control? And you talk about that as well, continuously growing to improve, not just technically proficient as a firefighter and medic or whatever, but also interpersonally with relationships and things like that. Take charge of that, your personal growth and development, instead of doing all the sniping and complaining, right?
Yeah. Ask your wife. Most times your spouse or significant other will be pretty brutally honest about your weaknesses. My wife reminds me all the time that either my listening skills are terrible, either I go to too many rock concerts, even though I wear earplugs all the time, and I've always worn earplugs. She's like, either you have selective hearing or you don't listen to me. And I think it's mostly I just don't listen and process stuff. But the point is that I recognize that's a weakness of mine, that I think we have to be aware of our blind spots, because again, it's so easy to try to, especially those in supervisory positions, before you try to start managing, leading, supervising others, you better make sure your own shop is in order, because people today are very quick to be able to point out something of your flaws, good, bad, or indifferent, because that's the world we live in.
Oh, yeah. And you remind everyone right in the book, too, hey, you're going to be a leader. You're going to be watched. You're going to be judged. You're going to be evaluated. I believe there's a section in there you talk about that as well. And it comes with the territory. You are being watched. You are being judged. Might not be fair, but I guess you're probably doing it yourself, or were when you were a firefighter. You're looking at the officers and judging and evaluating, right? It comes with the territory.
I think most smart people are doing that because, if anything else, not for the negative things, but they're trying to look to others to learn some good and not so good. Meaning there's a lot of things, well, we can learn good and not so good from everybody in the world, including ourselves. And I think that's what good people are doing. Even if they never want to promote, they're trying to look up to those people and say, okay, I like what they did, or maybe I wouldn't do it that way, or I'd maybe try plan B if possible.
Yeah, yeah. And you even said in the book, too, it's funny, you talk about your wife telling you you're not a good listener. Is that why you put a section in there about that? I think that's in there, right? About being a good listener. Learn to become a good listener.
And thank God I married well, because I called her the other day. I can't remember where I was at. I check in every night when I'm not home and everything else. And there was something I was getting distracted. And she goes, I'll talk to you tomorrow night. Text me when you're back at the hotel safe after the concert or whatever, But I go, what? No, she goes, I can tell you're distracted. You're not listening. It's all good. And she don't take it personal. But it's like,
I absolutely love it. What are some of the other big ones that you really think are really important in this personal development journey that our listeners can take to heart and really concentrate on? I know you got a lot of them in there.
Well, we live in a polarizing world where there's a lot of people. I'll use the example. If you were to ask what's the most popular baseball team, you'd probably hear the same team names. The Yankees usually come out there, LA Dodgers. There's a few select teams. Flip it the other way around. What are the most hated baseball teams? You'll probably hear the same names.
Same names, yes, yeah.
Because they're polarizing, when you're that popular, I guess, for whatever reason, maybe it's the big city, because those cities are very obviously huge. It's either like, is there any middle ground? Yeah, there's middle ground. But look at leadership the same way. Look at some of our most successful leaders. Whether they're presidents of the United States. And I say that because that's such a in-your-face position, because everybody knows who that is. And obviously the level there. There's always going to be people on both sides of the coin. And I think the whole point about personal leadership is, I don't care who you're idolizing or you're looking to, or learning things from. Don't be so focused in the weeds that you're not. Everyone is so quick to point out all the positives of people, and that's great. Everyone's got positives, but don't forget there's negatives too. And I'm not saying dwell on the negatives, but try to at least have a well-rounded view of what you're taking away from somebody, so you're not so blind that you're going, wait a second, no, that can't be that way. And it goes for, it's like, look at some of our famous military leaders, look at some of our, whether it's maybe athletes, maybe it's just politicians. Try to always look at the full pictures. I think that's where people tend to forget. So
yeah,
keeping it open-minded.
You mentioned military, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about the podcast listeners that you're listening to is being pre-recorded for the show on June 18th, and today is June 5th, and it was 80 years ago today that our soldiers of the Allied armies were preparing for the great D-Day invasion, and it was the great leader, General Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who put that team together. And I talk about this all the time in my little bit of leadership talks or lessons that I pass on in my class, just about the personalities he had to work with. Yeah. He was the ultimate leader. He made the decisions, but he had some personalities under him, blood and guts Patton, hard charging, could be tough to work with. Omar Bradley on the British side, who could be considered arrogant in his way or the highway, hard to work with. And then Omar Bradley in the middle, the gentleman's GI general. But he had all these unique person. And he didn't quit and say, I can't work with these people. He knew how to play their strengths. He knew how to talk to them. He knew how to listen to them. He knew still how to command. And when he did make a decision, even if they didn't agree with it, he did it in such a way that he got them to buy into it. And look at what they achieved 80 years ago tomorrow, June 6, 1944,
Wow.
right?
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. God, time flies.
Yeah. And, people easily could have been like, he easily could have thrown his hands up in the air. I'm not going to work with these guys. I can't get along with Patton or Montgomery, but no, he didn't. So, you talk to in the book, I wanted you to explain to our listeners about that 50.1% rule that you have in there, because I think that plays a little bit into learning to work with people. Can you explain what you mean by the 50.1% rule?
Well, yeah. I remember when I was a captain, we have 3-person engine companies, 4 on the truck companies. And I remember whether I'm on the engine or the truck, I'm supervising either 2 or 3 people. And when I was promoted to captain from firefighter, there's a lot of things I look back that I could have done a lot differently. And I share a lot of those things in the book I don't think I was a strong leader, but a lot of times where that came from was sometimes I was so worried about when I had to hold one of those folks accountable because of something they did, not because of something I did. That's my job, supervisor, to hold people accountable. Thank God most of the time people do their jobs, do it well, never cause problems. But in every organization, there's that less than 5% of the time where bosses have to be bosses. And I remember sometimes worrying about, well, if I have to sit this one person down and have an adult conversation to hopefully get them back on track, whatever they made me have that conversation for, it's like, oh my God, are they going to hate me? Am I going to, and it wasn't until I had a wise assistant chief when I was bouncing something off of him. He goes, Steve, if firefighter X makes you have a sit down conversation as a captain to basically hold them accountable for something they did, first of all, you're doing your job. Number 2, don't worry about them. They're probably going to get butthurt or hate you or not have a problem with it or acknowledge that they put you in that position. But even if they don't like you or they hate you because you had to hold them accountable, which might just be an adult conversation because not everything requires disciplinary action. But anyway, his point was that don't worry about that one person, worry about the impact on everybody else. And he had that quote of worry about pleasing the greater good, meaning the 50.1%. Because you're not going to please everybody. And that's one of the things I was guilty at. I tried to be friends with everybody. I tried to please. I naively thought if that I was liked because I was a nice guy and I let everyone do what they want to do, that I'd have more followers that way. Well, I learned over the years, some people just take advantage of you and things don't get done. And yeah, most people want to do the right thing and will do the right thing. But sometimes people do need direction and being held accountable. So it's really just recognizing that one person or maybe those couple of people that you maybe have to hold accountable for whatever reason, or give them maybe something that they don't want to hear or have to deal with. No, it's for the best interest of the organization or the community or whatever else. And that's, I think, the hard part for especially newer leaders stepping into that first line supervisor position. And I don't care if there's a promotional process, like a lot of departments, career departments use like an assessment center to get promoted, an oral interview, maybe a writing exercise, teaching demonstration, emergency tactical simulations. I know on the volunteer sides, a lot of times it might just be an election. It might just be an appointment, maybe no formal process, maybe an interview, maybe seniority. And I get there's different ways to do things. But when you were in that first line supervisor, lieutenant, or captain, it can be a struggle because that buddy to boss conundrum is still there. Sure. Chase Sargent wrote a great book on that. Mm-hmm. But the point is that don't worry about the smaller minority of folks. Yeah, they may not agree with what you have to say as a leader. Worry about the greater good. Now, if you're pissing off the greater good, then maybe there's part of the problem right there. But I look at people in those high up leadership positions, whether you're fire chief, police chief, governor, city manager, mayor, governor, president, think back to, I always love this discussion in class when we talk about leadership. Everyone talks about, oh yeah, I want to be a boss. I'm going, okay, think back to March of 2020, right before the pandemic. How many of you would have loved to be the CDC, Center for Disease Control director? Everybody always tells how they could have done a better job, but it's like, and a position like that, rarely, if you look at the history, doesn't have to make those tough decisions that often. Usually it's maybe every 7 or 8 years. Hopefully we never deal with that again in our life. But anyway, yeah, we all talk, you're going to piss off half the people, and there's other half that you're probably going to have no problem with the decision you make. And I think that's the challenging part in today's world, just recognizing that, you know what, as long as you're doing things for the greater good and for the right reasons, for the community, for the organization as a whole, and for the personnel as a whole, you can at least go to sleep at night. Someone may get pissed off at your decision, but at the end of the day, that's on them because they put themselves in that position.
And in your way of thinking, and in this section of the book, personal leadership, this is something that you should think about as you're developing as a leader in the fire service. This is something that you can concentrate on to try and do a better job, because it's not easy. As I said, you talk about CDC. Yeah, hindsight's always 20/20, right? So you do the best job you can with the information you have, and you'll learn to work as part of a team and present your ideas and explain the why. And the other thing you talked about too, and I think this is so important, is pay attention to what's going on. Like, it amazes me when there's fire officers or leaders out there that aren't the least bit interested in the fire service locally or even nationally. They're not checking the news trends or the sites, and they're just not paying. They'd be the ones that don't know about the proposed OSHA standards that have been discussed, right? If you're going to achieve success as a leader, you got to be in the know a little bit, don't you, Chief?
Oh, without a doubt. And that's one of the things I tried as a firefighter. Now, when I was a firefighter, I got promoted to captain back in 2001. I was promoted to captain. The internet was still relatively new at that point. There was no such thing as social media, but obviously there was fire engineering coming to the firehouse every month. So that was our access points for the most part. Obviously today it's a lot easier because it's not just a hard copy of fire engineering. It's things are in our face, whether it's social media, internet. So the resources are there, but it still drives me batshit crazy when I'm having a class and I'll just sort of have a random poll. Hey, how many of you have ever, heard of, Fire Engineering Magazine? And of course, half them is like, what's that? And it's like, I partially blame them, but then I don't blame them. And when I say I do, but I don't blame them, is that in today's world, I was always taught years ago that if I'm going to go into something, go into it full speed ahead. Meaning if I'm going to become a firefighter, learn as much as I can, soak it in, find my mentors. No different if I'm going to, let's say I want to become a doctor, or I want to open up a business, or I want to be an athlete. I'm going to learn as much as I can about how to be the best that I can be at whatever that line of work is. So to me, there's some laziness that comes in there, but it's like, okay, how many of you know what, firefighter close calls is? What's that? Billy Goldfeder? Who? The guy with the walrus mustache. And I say that sincerely because he's a good friend, and respect the man dearly. But it's like, oh my God, are you live under a rock? But think about this. It's not just each of us. I also fail their mentors, fail their supervisors. I feel their mentors and their supervisors have failed, because to me, a good mentor, which may or may not be your boss, mentors could be the same rank or even junior, should be exposing people to everything. I mean, to me, the good company officers and chief officers today are exposing their personnel to, whether it's firefighter close calls. Maybe there was something posted there about a injury, accident, fatality, after action report. Maybe it was firefighter close calls. Maybe it's something for fire engineering. Maybe it's exposing them to FDIC or whatever. Hey, the state firefighters are doing a conference down there. It's like one of my friends who works my wife's department. She was going, I asked our new firefighter about Alan Brunacini, and they didn't know who Alan Brunacini was. And I go, how old's the firefighter? Well, like 22, 23 years old. I mean, nothing personal, but they didn't grow up with Alan Bernstein like we grew up with Chief. Right. God rest his soul. Right. But then flip it around. Like I told her, I go, okay, yeah, they should have known if they really took the time and effort to be into the job. I know I hear that complaint a lot about people around the country, is sometimes the newer generations are not into the job like we used to be. Okay, maybe they're not, maybe they don't know what they don't know, but it's up to us to be able to say, hey, here's some legacy leaders. I'll use that analogy in my intro to fire science class. It's a semester long to expose them on everything in the fire service. I do like once a week, I introduce them to leaders. Rick Lasky, here's Rick Lasky. Here's Billy Goldfeder. Here's Andoni Castros.
Love it.
Here's Eddie
Love
Buchanan. A lot of fire engineering authors, FDIC speakers. And I share a lot of those keynote speeches that they have done that are still on YouTube on fire engineering. And I'm like, hey, these are leaders of the fire service that still have a lot of value that we can learn from. So I think each of us in the fire service have that obligation to continue paying it forward by exposing people to different things. That's mentoring is, hey, you weren't familiar with this. No, I'm not. Well, here it is. Let me show you.
Yeah. I talk about it in my class too. I call it homework assignment. I say, you're going to have a little homework assignment, and I'll give out names of some of these legacy leaders. I like that term you use, and tell them that they need to read about who these people were and what their impact was on the fire service. And even if they've passed away, their impact that continues today. So I love it. Personal leadership, things you can do to personally make yourself better, and recognize that you never know it all and you can still do a lot. You may have got the promotion, but you can still improve. And if you haven't got the promotion yet, you can work on these as you're gaining experience in your volunteer or paid department. Great words of advice there, Chief. And the second section is closely related. It's personnel leadership. And I'd like you to talk about that and what you talk about in that section.
A lot of that is leadership, as I call leadership lessons learned after getting the badge. Meaning when I got promoted to captain, I did the best I could, studying, having mentors, learning as much as I could, but nothing beats being in the position and really learning from your positives, but also learning from your negatives, but also the negatives and positives of others that you see in the department and also around the world. And I think it's a collection of little lessons learned about trial and error. Because we've all probably seen that book called The Fire Chief's Handbook, that book that's like this thick. And I remember having it on my desk one day when I was deputy chief admin. I remember the fire chief, brand new fire chief, walked in my office and picks up the Fire Chief's Handbook. He goes, throw that crap away. He goes, you want to be a fire chief? I go, I don't think so anymore. But he goes, great book. He goes, but it ain't. And he was just being sarcastic because there's so many things that are thrown to us in every position, fire chief, deputy, assistant, even engineer, even captain, that there's only so much you could write in a book to cover because each situation is different. So a lot of little lessons learned about navigating personnel issues, because when you made that comment acknowledging the 80 years ago today for the military and Eisenhower, I think I'd be curious to see today, because today we live in a very people today are very comfortable about speaking their opinion. There's Yelp, there's even just whatever on the internet. People are very free to say what they want, not fearing consequences. And sometimes there are consequences. I'd be curious to see how some of those strong historical militaristic leaders that were very successful, the names that you mentioned, how they would do today with today's, and I'm not blaming generations, because I'm not going to bag on a certain generation, because to me, it's not a generational issue. We've always had generational issues. There will always be generational issues. The only thing that change are the titles of those things, the situations. Technology is a complaint now. It wasn't here 50 years ago. What's it going to be 50 years from now? But my point is, you have to be ever evolving, because we live in that democratic society. When I say democratic, it's people, everyone feels they have a voice, which is a good thing.
Right.
Everyone gets butthurt if their voice isn't heard or acted upon. And I think that's a lot of those personnel lessons, because it's a lot of navigation, because everybody's different. Everyone, the old saying, 30 years when we got on the job, it was like, hey, jump. Hey, how high? Jump. Why? And I'm not against the why. It's just the world we live in. So
you talk about times changing in a different, just a different mindset today, and how people might not be the way they were 80 years ago. So one of the strategies with today's generation that is talked about quite a bit, and you would discuss it in your book as well, is to make everybody feel as they are a valued member of the team. I don't know if that was emphasized as much 80 years ago, because you're on this team, this is what you're going to do. No ifs, ands, or buts. You say jump, I say jump, you answer how high. So what are some of the things we can do, and why is it important today to make everyone feel like they're part of the team in this personnel leadership portion of the book?
Well, I mean, look back, and again, for all the people that complain about the younger generations today, I'll be the first to throw it back in their face, whether they agree or disagree. But it's like, well, these kids today, okay, don't blame the kids, blame the parents. If that's the way the parents are raising them, and I use the example as my wife and I, the other day, we're taking a walk around our neighborhood, and it's graduation time for all the schools around the country. And there was something that I'd never seen before, like on our neighbor's house, kids graduating, going from, whatever, elementary school to middle school or whatever it's called around here. Yeah, we don't have kids, so sorry if I got the names wrong. It's called a promotion ceremony now. And I had to ask my neighbor, I'm going, promotional ceremony? And I'm thinking, because to me, we know what promotion means in the fire service, and you go from one position to another and whatever else. And it's like, no, they're getting promoted from whatever. They're leaving this school to go to the next school. And I think back, and I know there's probably many studies or many whatever thoughts behind all this positivity, whether it's giving out trophies or making everyone feel valued. And I don't want to downplay what my point is, but it's the society we live in. And it's like, so all these kids almost like, okay, I'm getting promoted. It's like, no, you just did the bare minimum to get through the next grade. I mean, it's not like it's a huge, I'm sorry, but when I graduated junior high school or elementary school or high school, it's not like I squeaked by to 2.09 to grade point average to barely get out of there, but it wasn't like I was like, oh, well, this high achievement. I showed up, I did the job and everything else, but tying it back to today's workforce, it's not a generational issue as much as a society issue. And I think we, each of us have, as leaders, have to, and even as a firefighter, trying to recognize how you're going to interact with your fellow peers, if not your bosses, because your bosses could be younger than you. There's always that possibility.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the challenge today, is just recognizing that people want to be valued. I'm not saying give out trophies. Don't quote me as that, because I'll be the first to say people need to earn stuff. But unfortunately, in the world we live in, it almost makes it feel like we have to do that. And I think people expect that, but it is what it is. We can complain all we want about it, but that's the world we live in. Look at what business and private industry is coming out with in a lot of their leadership articles that come out there. And it's a lot of the same stuff that applies to the fire service. It's more people want to feel valued. People want to have their voice heard. Not to say that goes with it, but it's, like I said, more democracy in that sense, where people feel like more of a valued team member versus do it because I told you to. Okay.
Yeah. And in the volunteer fire service world, I like to remind my listeners that in a lot of cases, there's value in every member. They can bring value to your organization, but you might have to discover it. And that requires getting to know them a little bit and respecting them. And but you can cultivate some of everyone brings strengths to an organization.
Well, and let me just add to that. 30 years ago, we talked about the quantities of people that were wanting to become either paid or volunteer firefighters. And today it's just not there. Sometimes to be successful, we have to change our way of thinking and doing business. You look at what happens. Look at Kodak Film Company, Rochester, New York, about an hour west of you, an hour the other way east. Mm-hmm. How successful they were. When I was growing up, there was none of these little things out there, but they had to adapt with the times. Otherwise, digital's out there. Yeah, there's still old school film, but back to the volunteer portion of it, it's change is tough, but let's say someone's maybe 60 years old and maybe they have a heart condition and they can't function as a volunteer or even paid fire. Well, I'll use volunteer, but maybe they have some other talents that can still be used. And I think that's where I think we need to do a better job, even myself as I get older, recognizing that, okay, maybe this isn't realistic today, but maybe we can have them do this. Maybe they're great at this.
Right.
And I think,
And then with that personnel leadership development, I think it's important to say with that is you get new members joining, they may become officers. They don't know anything about the 60-year-old, 65-year-old, whatever, who back in the day was doing everything this younger member is doing, but due to health concerns or whatever, maybe it's just even job demands. They just don't have the time they had when they were 30 because now they're the CEO of a company or whatever. They're traveling more, that you owe them the respect. And I think any sort of personnel leadership lesson development there is to learn to respect your people as much as, it's just so important to offer respect and appreciate who you have working for you.
Oh, yeah, and not forget where you came from without a doubt, but respecting others, because giving them the opportunity to, like you mentioned, the 6-year-old person that maybe, well, obviously they're not as spry as they used to be. I mean, I'm 57. I totally get it, and I can appreciate that. But recognizing that, okay, as long as they still have a good positive attitude, as long as they still want to give something, maybe they can't give like they used to give, that we used to expect. But if there's still that desire, that passion, and that ability, let's find a way to still have them be part of it. Because I think that's where some people are maybe losing out on people because they're so rigid that, for the longest time, we had a volunteer program within our department. I mean, we're a career department, but we had a volunteer program. And over the years, when it was all farmlands here in the Silicon Valley, there was a need for volunteers. But then in the 1950s, 1960s, everything started blowing up, housing and, industry and everything else, where it pretty much pushed the volunteer industry or need away because it was career. But thankfully, our department still kept the volunteers because we looked at it. Number one, we had a lot of them that were 10, 20-year volunteers. They were full-time employees, whatever they were doing, but they still wanted to give back, which was awesome. But then when I was training chief my last few years, a lot of those 30-year, 35-year veterans pretty much are in their 60s and said, you know what, I can't do the firefighting anymore. I'm good. I've had a great time. Thank you. Well, then we had to retool our program. Really, it's a career development program of aspiring firefighters, give them some experience. But then we also found there was some other people within the community that maybe didn't want to be firefighters, but had certain skills to maybe help out. Maybe it's as public information. Maybe it's with internet, website stuff, or whatever else. Maybe, again, I think that's the challenge of today is you didn't have to be adaptable years ago, but we got to be adaptable today no matter what type of department we're in.
Right. So personnel leadership, the things that you can do to be better at supervisor, managing, and leading others. Is there anything else you want to say on that section there, Chief?
Just to sum it up, I think it's, personal is obvious, meaning we always have to strive to be the best that we can be. The personnel part of it is, even if you're just a firefighter, you're never just a firefighter. But there's some tips in there that I think should help everybody get along better. Number one, with their coworkers, but also with their supervisors, because a lot of times lower ranks don't understand the responsibilities that their bosses have. Well, if I was captain, I'd be doing this. If I was chief, yeah, you would, but you forget there's laws that say you can't do this, and we got to hold you accountable. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, now you do. So that's the whole focus of that too, is understand how each of us fit within that organizational chart so we can stay out of trouble, but also be the best that we can be.
I heard a great story recently. I'm a fire commissioner here in New York State for my department, elected by the taxpayers, along with 4 other fire commissioners to oversee the department and collect the money from taxes to decide what we're going to do with it. And there's a lot of rules and laws that we have to follow. Yeah. And sometimes we have to say no to certain things, or we have to do certain things that the rank and file have no clue why we're making that decision. And sometimes they can become upset. Someone told me once what they do in their department is when there's training for the fire commissioners, we have to be trained and certified as a commissioner in New York State. And when that training comes up, is to send the fire chief to that training and even some rank and file firefighters so they can see what these responsibilities are. And the department that did that said these people came back and said, wow, I never knew or never realized there's that whole other section that's got to be dealt with. There these laws that got to be followed and things. So I thought that was really cool.
I'm glad they do that, because that's something that today is part of mentoring, because I know when most firefighters have no desire to sometimes promote, let alone understand or care to understand what their boss have to deal with, especially when it comes to finances, politics, laws. But the more we can do to sit down people, and as painful as it is, educate them on the challenges. Like one time with our union, there was some complaints about why we were doing this or not doing that. We actually had for our union executive board a full day budget session. As painful as it is, we had our finance director literally explain the budget, and it was painful, not just for the chiefs, but it was painful for the union guys that are firefighters and captains. Like, I don't want, but they came out of that going, oh my gosh, I didn't realize there's laws, there's financial issues, there's politics. They just like, make it happen, chief. Come on.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, come on. Just snap your fingers.
I'm going to go to jail if I do that. And it's like, and I think that is a critical part of mentoring too. Again, it doesn't mean you have to promote, but at least understand how we fit into the system, and more how your bosses fit in, so we can better work within the whole organizational chart to get things done for the best reasons.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. And then section 3 in the book, that's the one that all the newly elected officers, they get all excited. Oh, this is what it's all about. Fire scene leadership, or fire ground, or emergency scene leadership. I don't care about all this other stuff. So let's talk about section 3 and some of your takeaways from that. I know my favorite takeaway from section 3 is on radio etiquette, because again, in my paid job is I'm in charge of the fire alarm office here in my town. So I love that section. But what do you have to say about becoming a better leader on the fire ground or at the emergency scene? What can we do? What do you talk about in the book about that?
Yeah, the radio etiquette, staying away from things such as be advised at this time. I just love those things. But it comes down to command presence. You look at some of the best speakers out there are those that can be short, concise, and to the point. Paint a picture, tell a story, but not write a War and Peace novel of how many thousands of pages. Some of the suggestions I have in there, I was fortunate to serve as a fire captain. I was fortunate to serve as a battalion chief out in the field. Our deputy chiefs are more administrative. I know a lot of deputy chiefs back east are more operational based. You manage maybe firehouses or whatever else. So I had time managing incidents as a company officer and chief officer. But it's not about necessarily strategy and tactics about fighting fires. There's plenty of resources out there on that. My whole focus is little lessons learned on different things related to command presence, managing incidents successfully, things to think about. People always talk about size up. Oh, size up. When I get to the building, I'm going to size it up. No, size up occurs from day one. Size up is training. Size up is learning your first two area, not relying on technology, because technology will fail. We all have this great technology in our apparatus for the most part to get us to calls, but it will fail. So not getting the basics of doing our job, which is obviously knowing the technology, but also trying to learn our way, getting out of the firehouse, pre-fire planning, walking through buildings, talking strategy, talking tactics, learning from things, reviewing after action reports, a lot of different things like that.
And learning how to talk on the radio in a professional manner. I love what you say in there about, we do joke about that at the alarm office at the time, be advised, or at this time, or you get, you want to paint a picture for the first arriving units, but you don't want to sound like an encyclopedia, right? You want it short and concise. And
every firefighter, whether you want to promote or not, doesn't matter. But to me, every firefighter should spend some time at dispatch at the alarm office. If for no other reason, to sit there next to one of the dispatchers and go, like I did for the first time, going, uh-oh, do you hear that a lot? Yes, we hear that a lot. And it's like, and they're nice, they're professional, and they're not most, like out here, a lot of them they're not firefighters, they're civilian dispatchers. But they don't have to be firefighters to recognize that sometimes you guys talk too much, or you scream too much, you yell too much, or you don't get to the point. And sitting up at dispatch, even if it's just for a few hours, or listening, obviously, on the scanner, which is very easy to do, you pick up a lot of things of like going, ooh, I don't want to be that guy, that gal of talking so much that I'm stepping on people or I'm getting timed out or whatever else.
Yeah, absolutely. So a whole section on fireground and emergency scene leadership, which it's just, again, I've got just a ton of sticky notes in there. And I did find it interesting too that you covered about, and this could be not controversial, but before requesting additional resources, be sure you need them, as opposed to always just call for help, because you can always turn it around. I found that interesting. Talk a little bit about that. What's your thought on that?
Well, I was raised in the fire service. It's better to call early than call late, because of the lag time it takes to get resources rolling. Obviously, farther away Firehouse is, sometimes the delay because of maybe whatever else. So I'm a fan of calling resource early. I mean, I'm not saying you're getting dispatched to, say, a house that's on fire, building on fire. You send your first alarm, whatever that first alarm consists of. Now, I'm not a fan of saying, you leave the firehouse. One time I was an engine one captain, first due to a structure fire at like midnight. So I'm waking up, getting boogers out of my eyes. And all of a sudden, engine one, we got, report a fire in the first floor and the second floor apartments, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, copy. We're sending 3 engines, couple trucks, couple battalion chiefs. My battalion chief gets on the radio and he calls a second right from the get-go. No one's on scene yet. And I'm going, okay, that's fine, whatever. It's his call. But I'm looking for the fire in the sky. I'm seeing nothing.
Right.
I'm pulling up to this thing going, okay, are we going the right place? And we pull up there, and it was an exterior fire. And I remember pulling up there and everything else, and I'm trying not to laugh. I'm like, engine one on scene, establishing command. Got an exterior fire on the first floor that's lapping up a little bit at the second floor, but engine one can handle with truck one, and engine 7 cancel the rest of the balance. And let's, go back to primary. Because I figured at this point it's an exterior fire. Now, maybe that was a little too premature by canceling things, but it was not a big conflagration. It was a little bit of an exterior fire. We knocked it down with one hose line, got crews inside to make sure there's no extension, search and rescue issues. And my battalion chief gets there, and I'm a captain. I'm aspiring to be a battalion chief at some point. I'm going, Chief, I go, because he was pissed that I canceled him. And I go, what were you thinking? I go, I'm just trying to learn from you. I'm not trying to second guess you, but I was trying to learn, why'd you call the second alarm when we're not even there? Now, I could see if you're getting told multiple people trapped, reports of whatever else, maybe a 5-story building fully involved under construction, I can see calling a second alarm. But he goes, well, I heard, fire in 101 and 201. We all know like 101 is here and 201 is floor above. And I'm like, okay, that's your call. But to me, that was almost a little bit of overkill of calling it too fast. And it's a fine line, because you don't want to be the boy that cried wolf by calling it too fast, but then you also don't want to get there. And like one of the things I talk about in the previous section is there's nothing worse than assigning your companies and then looking at your staging area over here and going, uh-oh, I got nobody left. And you have other assignments that need to happen, and now you got farther away units that haven't even been dispatched yet. So it's a fine line, but I think it's always better to call early. But you also don't want to pull up, send me the hallelujah. Send me one of our captains the hallelujah package. Send us everything you got. That's not command presence.
Yeah, right. Vinny Dunn talks about command presence in one of his great book, Command and Control of the Fire Scene, and there's a lot to be said for command presence. And the one thing I noticed with the additional resources arriving, it's great to have in the volunteer ranks, and I guess in the paid service too, they call it auto aid for predetermined alarm assignments for structure fires, or maybe there may be a structure fire, so they send a lot of automatic aid. And there's a balance there too, because some departments do automatic aid for fire alarm activations, because this day and age, everyone's hurting for members. So I get it. I'm not opposed to it. But what happens is you start burning people out, and they're home. If on the volunteer side, you're home working in the yard, mowing the lawn, working on your car, whatever, and you go out for the 10th time for that alarm activation, auto aid to a neighboring company, you ain't going. And now if it turns into something, you're behind the 8 ball. So there's that fine line. There really is.
Well, especially in the volunteer system, because like in the paid system, it's a lot easier because you got rigs there. Like there's a county just north of us, San Mateo County. The biggest department is like 7 stations. They're all small cities, mostly 2, 3, 4, 5 firehouses. they're all separate departments. There's about 12 different departments, but they have one dispatch center for the entire county. So that whole system is one fire department, even though they're different patches, union agreements. They function true auto aid, closest resource. And you could have a structure fire like that. I don't know if anyone saw 2 days ago, I think it was on Monday, there was an 8-alarm fire at I think it was an apartment complex under construction. Well, that was Redwood City. There are, I think, 5 or 6 firehouses in that city. There's nowhere they could provide 8 alarms, but that whole alarm, they've got it already programmed out in the CAD where it's pretty much closest rigs, regardless of jurisdiction. They train the same. They have similar SOGs. That works. But yeah, from the volunteer side, especially when it's hard to compare the two, but I think there's benefits to auto aid. But the key is obviously, especially when it's a true working incident, try to make sure you get rigs there quicker, because we all know that how fast fire burns. You know, you touched on the whole 2 in, 2 out thing. I mean, that's been a polarizing issue for the last 25 years. And there's data now that's supporting, is it really making a difference? Is it not making a difference? And I think the data is showing that we all probably realize getting water on that fire the fastest is going to be the most benefit to any life safety, not just them, but us. Getting fast water on there and getting our personnel in there to the most affected areas. But again, on the volunteer side, it's a lot more challenging based on, you know, who and where, everything else.
Tell you what else is a challenge on the volunteer side is with the auto aid is a lot of times the incident commander who could be overwhelmed because he or she has so much going on.
Yeah.
What are you doing with this auto aid? You have it all coming on the initial assignment, and now you got to figure out what are they doing, and hopefully you can work some of that out ahead of time. And we're a fan in our area of going, instead of saying engine 2 is going to do this, or Smithville engine 3 is going to do this, it's first arriving, second arriving, third arriving, because you never know who's getting there first, second, and third, because we're all hurting for people power today, and one department over might get there first. So we're trying to train as if you're the first arriving, here's where you park. This is for the, you know, the normal routine bread and butter fire. Seems to work out well that way, but you got to be aware of what's coming, where it's coming from, and what you're doing with it. Because otherwise you got a lot of people showing up and it could be a circus.
So true. No, that's good. You got to adapt with the times and the situation that you're dealt with.
Right. So section 4 in the book, Firehouse Leadership, probably covers some of the things that we talked about developing as a leader. And the one thing I wanted to ask you about that is you say you got to go out and walk around. You got to be paying attention to what's happening in your firehouse.
Right.
And let me ask you this, but how do you fix things without appearing to be a micromanager?
Oh, man, if I had that answer, I'd be a billionaire.
Didn't you write about it? It's nothing.
Well, it's such a fine line, because when is micromanaging going on today? Yes, it is. In every line of work, it happens. I get it. But sometimes when people throw the word micromanaging out, it's because they're being held accountable. And to me, there's a fine line between micromanaging and providing direction. A fine line between providing direction and micromanaging. I mean, because it's hard, because in a perfect world, everyone would just do your job. Hey, Rick, you got this. Tom, I need you to get that. Lisa, you got this and everything else. But then depending on what direction or expectations you gave them, whether it's the first time you've asked them, the first time you've worked with them, or you know them very well and you get along fine, there's challenging there. But the whole micromanaging things, it's sometimes every now and then I'd hear a certain chief, when I was the deputy chief operations, I'd be at a firehouse and I'd hear maybe a firefighter captain, that battalion chief is micromanaging us. I go, well, can you tell me an example? Well, he's telling me I got to document all my training reports. Okay, no, that ain't micromanaging. That's holding you accountable. But he's micromanaging me. When people say micromanaging me, it's almost like I'm going to sue you. It's a phrase that's used to usually scare people off, because I've had some chiefs when I was deputy chief operations. Well, chief, I don't want to be a micromanager. Okay, no, that's not micro. You're just holding them accountable because they're not doing their job. Everybody else is doing their training records or doing their job. And it's a fine line. And that's why again, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you could get away with a blanket, just get everything done. Well, now you got to know how people tick. You got to know what their strengths are, their weaknesses are. Not that you didn't back then, but you got to have that fine line, because once you know, again, you don't want to micromanage, but again, you got to make sure you're providing appropriate direction. Because I'll use an example. I mean, I had a captain when I was the training deputy chief. These kids today, I told the new rookie firefighter to clean the bathrooms and didn't do any of that stuff. Well, tell me about it. And I go, did you provide them direction? Well, I don't want to micromanage them. Well, what did you tell them? You got the bathrooms today, kid. Okay, maybe 30, 20 years ago, we would know what that means. And I hate to say it, when this captain ended up talking to this one rookie firefighter, the kid explained to him, basically, is like, the funniest story. He goes, I never had to really do bathrooms as a kid. I never had to do bathrooms. We had maid service because he came from a well-to-do family. And I've had the same thing with captains complaining about these kids today. I told them to cut the grass and do the yard work at the firehouse.
I don't know.
They can't even start the lawnmower. And again, that separate kid going, we had gardeners. Now, again, I blame the kid partially, because if he recognized he was going to be a firefighter, you got to realize it's a blue-collar job that requires a lot of skills, and you better have the wherewithal to understand hand tools, power tools, and all that stuff, mechanical ability. But the captain at this point, and when the captain goes, we got to fire all these kids and hire kids that know how to do this stuff. They're not out. I mean, they're out there, but they're not out there. These are good people that we're hiring because we've vetted them out pretty well. They're good character traits. If we have to train them to do the bathrooms, then we train them. And I hate to say this now, this sounds bad, and I don't know if it still occurs in our department, but there came a time about 5 years ago where we started doing, at the time, our training captain did a day in the life of the firehouse for the recruits. They're in 4 months of rookie training. They're firefighter 1. And one of the days was how to load the dishwasher, how to clean the bathrooms, how to do dishes, how to answer
a wall phone.
Holy moly. I mean, and because one of the days I remember getting the phone call from the training captain who's running the academy going, one of the kids last night put liquid dishwasher soap into the dishwasher, and that's what they do at the end of the day is they clean the kitchen and get everything ready for the next day, and sure enough, they came, those suds everywhere in the kitchen. And the academy captain was really pissed off, and I'm laughing my butt off. I wasn't helping the situation, but I go, you know what? We can't assume everybody knows everything. And I know that sounds very lowering the standards or maybe accepting mediocrity, but that's the world we live in today. Again, blame the parents for not exposing people to basic functions of life. They know what they know or know what they don't know. But sorry, I didn't mean to deviate there, but it is.
No, it's good stuff. And so you do believe it's important, though, if you're the leader, firehouse leadership, it's important to be out checking on what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, finding people doing things right, reinforcing positive behavior. As I always told people, hey, Chief, you checking up on us? I got better things to do than check up on you because I don't want extra paperwork. I don't want extra counseling sessions. I got enough stuff on my plate. I'd rather be able to see you doing something right. Like when someone's checking out the power tools and they got the earplugs in and I'm walking around the station and I just do that to them. And they're like, what, Chief? I go, no, thanks for wearing your hearing protection. And some people would say that's giving them a trophy. I'm reinforcing positive behavior because every now and then there's some that don't have the hearing protection in. And it's like, oh, I don't need that here. It's like, no, dude, I'm trying to help you enjoy your retirement and your family and not have to wear hearing aids. And sorry if I'm that guy, but I think it's finding people doing things right and also getting a pulse on what you got to work with for the day. The volunteer side is totally challenging because at a firehouse on a paid side, you got people on shift for the day. Volunteer side, you may only see them when it comes to responses or maybe training sessions or meetings or whatever else. And that makes it even more challenging on the volunteer side. But it still comes back to getting to know your folks and trying to get out there, reinforce positive behavior. But on the occasion, you do see something that's deviated from where it should be, correcting the behavior. Because again, if you walk by something, you can what you permit, you promote. If you let something slide one time, you condone the behavior, and they'll be the first to say, well, you never told me I couldn't do that when you try to hold them accountable. Like, well, I shouldn't have to tell you to do everything. I know you shouldn't, but you never told me, so don't hold me accountable now. Yep, I get it.
All right.
It's fine.
So lot of things we can be doing in the firehouse, and some great ideas passed on in section 4 in that book on how you can become a better leader within the firehouse walls. And then the section on administrative leadership. This is a section nobody wants to talk about. This is a section I didn't sign up for this, right? Wait a minute, I'm a lieutenant. I have to do paperwork, or I'm a chief and I've got to do more paperwork. And I always say, if you don't like paperwork, it's just like I always say, if you don't like people, don't be an officer. If you don't like paperwork, don't be an officer. Folks, as exciting as it is to lead people at the emergency scene and make command decisions and lead a team down that dark, smoky hallway, or, successfully resuscitate somebody at a medical call and be the leader at that call, there's a lot of administrative tasks that are important and are important to the success of your organization. You want your organization to be successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to protect your organization if something was to happen, to show you were doing things the right way, you were keeping the right records. So let's talk about administrative leadership. And first of all, what are we trying to solve here with administrative? What are the problems that we're trying to solve? And what do you talk about in this section?
I think when we got on the job years ago, there was very little administrative stuff, meaning you might have documented the bare minimum for a call, and that was about it. Now, unfortunately, there's so many requirements, whatever type of call, document it in the computer, and usually the computer systems are a pain in the butt to document things easily. I get it. But in today's modern world, this is what drives staffing. This is what drives budgets. Like it or not, law enforcement sometimes kicks our butt, no pun intended, because of how they keep sometimes the records of justification for certain things. Now, when I'm talking to firefighters, sometimes I'll hear firefighters, well, our fires are up around here. We're getting more fires than we've ever had. And then I'm like, well, when I run the records, fires are down. What do you mean? We're having more fires. Okay, anecdotally you might be, and realistically you may be, but they ain't getting documented. And again, why aren't they getting documented? Because, wait a second, you start digging into it. Okay, there was actually a fire that occurred because there was a pot in the stove, but it was coded in the ENFR system as maybe a smoke scare or maybe a false alarm. Because as soon as you click that firebox,
oh yeah,
boom,
yeah, a lot more work.
Another 10, 20, 30 minutes of like, oh my God, and cause of fire, spread, dollar loss. I've been there, trust me, been there, done that, where I'm like, it was a smoke scare. So I'm not saying I haven't, but now having the administrative experience and being in front of elected officials, or even just the fire chief, because we can all know in our hearts that we maybe need another firehouse, or maybe need another staff company, or a water rescue team, or insert program, insert apparatus, insert whatever dollar amount here. But when it comes to you, especially being a commissioner as an elected official who has fiduciary responsibilities, as you mentioned, as much as you want to support the firefighters, you got to have some justification from the taxpayer side, so you're not misusing or misappropriating taxpayer funds, I'm assuming. And I think that's that challenging part, is a lot of times when it comes down to it, the devil's in the details. Or I was the training chief when we had a firefighter fall off a ladder. So very tragic injury. Thank God he lived, but significantly injured. He was out for a long time. OSHA came in. OSHA obviously did an investigation. OSHA cited us for safety practices. I was at that receiving end trying to justify to the fire chief, because the fire chief looks at me, hey, Steve, training chief. He goes, OSHA's coming in. I want you to handle the investigation. You're the training chief. Yeah, got it, chief. So here's a 25, 30-year firefighter. OSHA's saying, give me all the records of his ladder training. Give me all the records of his training related to ladders, because there was a ladder-related incident. I remember the chief goes, how's the investigation going? It's actually pretty easy, chief. He goes, why is it easy? I goes, we ain't got much documentation. He goes, what are you talking about? I go, well, he goes, the guy's been on the job for like almost 30 years, right? But when I do a printout of all the training, and I know he's done training, don't get me wrong, because most crews are doing training every day in some form or fashion. But whether we drop the ball on is the administrative actually documenting it. So when it comes to documenting it, when we had that OSHA investigation, about 5 years prior to that, his first 20 years on the job was all hard copy training. That was all in a file cabinet that was pretty much nothing to speak of. In that last 5 years, we all had an automated system, so I could at least ladder training tied to this guy. Nothing. I showed he had like 2 hours of ladder training in 25 plus years. And then OSHA looked at us and goes, okay, well, now we got other issues. So the whole point is that was a lot of the why training that we had to share with our company officers. It's a pain in the butt to do the documentation. But if you're ever the training chief, it was embarrassing to have to tell the fire chief that I got nothing, chief. And here's the chief going, okay, we're going to get cited. We're going to have all these other issues. And it's, again, you don't appreciate it until you're filling those admin positions, but you recognize the importance, whether it's lawsuits, whether it's grand jury investigations, which thankfully don't happen that often, thankfully. But when they do, we're caught with our shorts down because we're not fighting that many fires, it looks like. So smoke scares.
Yeah. And people don't like record keeping, and it is such an important thing. I mean, training is obviously a huge thing to do correctly, but how about apparatus maintenance? How about equipment maintenance, hose testing, pump testing, ladder testing? Yeah, we do that. Okay, produce it, show it. Oh, shoot, we had the company in, we paid the bill. I guess we could dig out the bill, but now, what do you have in place in the firehouse? And again, in 2024 should be, there's a lot of great programs out there to help.
Yeah.
But that is a leadership responsibility as much as having that cool radio strap, the cool helmet because you're an officer, the portable radio. There's a lot more that comes with it.
Well, there's a saying I start out classes trying to get everyone straight. Leadership is a sexy topic usually. But I tell people when you talk about leadership, we also have to talk about management and supervision. Every rank has leadership responsibility, fire chief down to firefighter. However, when it comes to supervisory, that's usually company officer all the way up to fire chief. Management responsibility could be any rank. But the simple thing is we lead people. We manage things, but then when it comes to supervisory, we supervise people and we supervise things. Everyone that is especially a company officer above there's all those things. The leadership is the fun stuff to talk about, but we also have to respect those other things when it comes to management, as we talked about here, whether it's record keeping or previously with the personnel stuff, supervisory responsibilities. And I think that's the unsexy stuff that's not fun because it's not as fun as the running calls and solving problems.
But it's important, and you point out so well in that section 5 about how important it is and things that you can do to become a better administrative leader in your firehouse. I wanted to ask you too, you have a rule, you call it the 168 rule, and I was wondering if you could tell the listeners a little bit about that.
I was taking a class at the National Fire Academy a few years ago, and at one of the tables of my class, my group here, a fire captain out of Florida, he threw that out there one time. He goes, he was actually a chief, and he goes, it's the 168 rules. I'm like, what the hell is that? I've never heard of that. He goes, okay, how many hours do we have in a day? I go, 24 hours. He goes, times that by 7. What's 24 times 7? I'm like, let me get my calculator out. It's like 24 times 7, 168. He goes, that's the 168 rule, meaning there's only 7 days in the week, 24 hours a day. We only got so much time to get everything done. It's sort of a tongue-in-cheek, but because I was just seeing something on the internet earlier today about the struggle today of department firefighters that are frustrated because of whether it's mental health issues, staffing issues, budget issues, poor leadership at the top, in the middle, all the above. And that was one of the things that came out there, or the trying to do more with less. That's that mantra that's been out there. But like Chief Bernasini, God rest his soul, said, you can't do more with less. You can do different with less. You can do less with less, but you can't do more with less. And that's that whole point is there's only so many hours in the day. Pick your battles, prioritize things. Like as the training chief, when I looked at all the training mandates from OSHA, state mandates, local mandates, EMS mandates, I think we added up the mandates to be like 9 or 10 hours a day of training. And okay, a firefighter out here works 24 hours at a time. Well, 48 now, but still, you're 24-hour day. But you ain't going to be training for 9 hours. Hell, if I can get 2 hours of training, we're doing good. I'm not saying simultaneous. It might be 20 minutes here, 30 minutes here, an hour here. Rarely do we get blocks of 2 hours. But it comes down to prioritizing what you have to do and recognizing that we need to prioritize things. And there's only so many hours in the day. And then at some point, don't burn your people out.
A great administrative leadership lesson passed on. And so many others in there. And I also love, and we're going to wrap things up here in a minute, Chief, but I love the idea fairies, because I talk about that all the time. It's that person that always comes up and says, what you should do, right? Or what this department should do. And I always like to say, maybe you are you. It should be you that does it, right? It's because they always have these great ideas. They love to throw it at you and walk away.
I wish somebody would have told me that when I became not a captain, but especially a gold badge. As a chief, now that I'm a battalion chief and I'm responsible for like an SCBA program, I was responsible for certain programs. I wish someone would explain that better, because when you get into that new position, you're in charge of something, you're managing a program, there's people, hey, how you doing? And, we need to do this. We need a water rescue team. Oh, okay. And then, of course, you get sucked into that water rescue team. Then you pull that idea to your boss, and the chief's like, okay, let's see the data on how many drownings we've had in the last 5 years. Well, no one's drowned in the last 5 years. So why do we need a water rescue team? Well, because there could be people that are drowning. We're going to spend $2 million initially and $1 million every year after that for something that's not even there yet. And that's that fine line at the idea fairy. One of our retired captains, Paige Russell, we were having a safety committee meeting, and that was her phrase. And I'm going, I got to write this stuff down, because she goes, Chief, there's all these idea fairies. But the whole point is, first of all, as a chief, you can get very overwhelmed with people trying to add more work to your plate. And you said, hey, Chief, we need to be doing this. Newsflash to anybody that's worked or hasn't worked in a 40-hour on paper, 40 hours usually on paper, never in reality, usually a lot more, gold badge position, or even a captain position where you're managing something, maybe in training, EMS, whatever operations, you've already got a full plate as it is. And when someone comes in and say, hey, we need to be doing this, and the first thing they do is they pull the pin off the grenade, give you the grenade, and they walk out with a pin.
Yes. What
do you mean we got to do this program? And they don't want to be part of the solutions. The point about idea fairies, you're going to get overwhelmed with people coming in, but it's a good thing, because especially like if you're a new chief. Hey, Chief, I think we need to do that. I think we need to do that. I think it's great for anybody in those positions to have people coming to you, because that means you're approachable, which is a good leadership trait, because that is one of the things I talk about, personal leadership, be approachable. But also, you can't say yes to everything. When people want to come in, the idea fairies, make sure they take ownership of it, because I'll use an example. I remember we had a firefighter that goes, we need to start up a fire explorer post, because we used to have an explorer post years ago, but it died because it wasn't the main kids interested in fire service. But the first question that was popped back at him was like, okay, so how are you going to run this program? And the firefighter was like, what are you talking about? And I remember our fire chief going, well, he goes, I think it's a good program, but who's going to manage it? Well, the training division can manage it. They're already overworked as it is. Oh. And that was some good training that I had over the years, that I'm glad that people are willing to offer ideas, but a lot of people get frustrated when their ideas don't get accepted. But a lot of times it's because what they delivered was garbage in, garbage out, meaning if you're going to come up with an idea, make sure that you own that idea, make sure that you're willing to see it through. You've done the research, you've got the numbers on it, you've shot holes in this thing. And because you should know what the chief's going to be asking for. Okay, what's the initial cost? Well, it's only going to cost $1 million, whatever else. Okay. Our budget cycle is a 2-year budget cycle. So we're already out 18 months. So it can't happen what's the, not just initial cost, what's the annual costs? Are there recertification requirements? Are there equipment requirements? Right. Are there training requirements? And I think those things of, if we do a better job when people want to come to us with ideas, because to me, some of the best ideas that organizations ever get are from the lowest ranks, because they're the people, the end users, and they have these great ideas to help solve problems. But they also can't just pull the pin. They got to be able to be trained, groomed, mentored to recognize that you and I are joined at the hip. I'll go to bat for you as a chief to the command staff because I like your idea and because you've done the work, but you ain't going anywhere. You're going to own this thing. And then when you retire or get bored, you're going to already have a succession plan to have a team of people that are willing to see this, because otherwise the Explorer program in that example is going to die because you retired or you're bored. And I think that's where a lot of good programs die, is because the person gets bored, there's no succession plan, and they expect the department to continue it. Well, the department's got enough time.
Right. I'll tell you one other thing with those idea fairies. My little piece of advice to our listeners is, as you said, there's always ideas coming out, and what you should do. Here's what you should do. And let's be honest, as much as there's some really good ideas, every now and then you're going to be thinking in your mind how bad an idea is, or what is this person, an idiot? But it's how you react to that idea that's really, really important too, because you can think it, but you are respectful and you can say to somebody, I'll think about it, or even, here's why. I understand what you want to do, but here's why we're not going to. Because if you launch out and criticize and make fun of or treat them in a bad manner, they're not going to bring you their next idea, which might be the A-list idea.
Well, and that's where I've seen a lot of good quality people of all ranks get disenfranchised, because they took the time and effort to bring something forward, and basically whoever it was, usually a chief, rolls their eyes, or we've already tried that, it didn't work, or that'll never work here. And it's basically like, why am I wasting my time? I'm trying to help you guys out. Screw it. I'm just going to go ride backwards on engine one or drive engine one. And I've seen that, and I know what happens. That's why we in leadership positions, when people, number one, come up to us, don't roll your eyes. It may be a crappy idea, but you never know that sometimes. But it may not be good. Like, we had a firefighter one time that he wanted to start a drone program. Now, this was 10 years ago, before drones, they were just becoming popular. And he was pissed off that, because I was a brand new command staff member at the time. So he came up to me, he's like, Chief, because we got hired together, he's like, I got this great drone program, and I think it'd be beneficial. He goes, I've got it. I'm willing to write the policy. I'm willing to own the program, blah, blah, blah. He goes, we can get grant money for the program. I'm going, all great stuff, dude. But do you realize that the sheriff's office, because we're a county, sheriff's office is right now getting hammered from the privacy issues of drones, because they're still brand new. So the sheriffs couldn't even get a drone program going off even though every other fire department's doing it in the area. We're supposed to be the leaders. Well, I tried to explain to him that nobody else, I guess, apparently explained to him that, dude, politically right now, sheriffs can't even do it. So until those board of supervisors are convinced that it's not going to be a privacy issue and everything else, and he goes, well, what do I need to do? And I go, stand by, have it ready to go. At some point, elected officials change, opinions change. Maybe there's a situation that requires drones, or maybe just for whatever reason the sheriffs get it. That's how things work. But again, he was never explained all the political ramifications, and so he didn't know what he didn't know. And that's our job, to explain those fully. Even if you don't want to hear why we're saying no, you need to hear it. That it's political, maybe it's financing, maybe it's just not a good climate, maybe it's just other higher priorities right now. Yeah, it's a great program, but we need to get this going right now.
Which is always the good answer if it's something that in your mind is thinking this is the stupidest thing I ever heard of. It's got a lot of other things on my plate right now that I just can't get to that right now. But thank you for bringing it to my attention.
And you got to be sincere about it, because firefighters, obviously, we read through this stuff.
They'll read through you in a heartbeat, right?
And they may still not like the answer. And I've had to tell people, it's like, okay, you may not like the answer, but you need to hear it. You need to hear the why. You may not tell the why to everybody, but at least you need to hear the why, so at least you can understand. And please, you know what? Please come back. Come back in 6 months or a year, or I'll try to keep it on my whiteboard here. But for right now, it's not dead in the water, but we can't focus on it right now. Hopefully you respect that.
So much good information in Courage Under Fire Leadership, 6 solid sections. And you finish with one of my favorites. I love leadership lessons from others. And I know we're coming close to almost 2 hours, and I want to just see, I guess it would kind of put you on the spot. Do you have a favorite lesson or one that you want to share? Because they're all good.
Well, I could have written a whole book on leadership lessons for.
Oh, there's your next one.
Well, you know what? Well, the way this came about was, as I was writing this book a number of years ago, and I got so many thoughts and ideas. I did a Facebook, just out of curiosity, one time on Facebook, I asked that question, what are some leadership lessons from others? And this is what the culmination of was that I thought they're all fire service people in various capacities and situations. And that's where I put it all together is, you know what, some of them are only like a couple sentences, a paragraph, a couple bullet points. But what I like about that section is a wide variety of people from around the country, different ranks. I mean, one of them was not just fire chiefs, firefighters, captains, but also one of our former business civilian that worked in our business department. You know, she worked in our business department, and as much as firefighters, why do I got to do that paperwork? Okay, business pays your paycheck. Make sure your paycheck is on time. Make sure your benefits are processed. Oh, yes, those good people. Well, they're smart people. And it was funny as she and I were talking because, you know, she reached out with some of her ideas. And that I think is where sometimes we fail as leaders is we sometimes focus too much on learning from those within our scope. But we also, firefighters, I just got to look at firefighters. Well, make sure you also take into account everyone in your organization, not just the rank and file sworn members, but the civilians that maybe don't understand firefighting because they've never been through a fire academy, nor should they, but I want them trained in business management because that's what they're doing. For example, payroll, better be good on that. Those are sometimes the best lessons because they all tie back to people skills, because everything that we talk about in any leadership book is people, getting along with people. And that's why today in such a polarizing, we live in a divisive world. And people are going, we don't live in a divisive world. You don't believe me? I dare you on social media to write fog nozzles rule. Watch how much hatred you're going to get versus smoothbores rock. I mean, that's going to be the most popular post today. You know, everyone's going to be on the bandwagon. But stepping back into the bigger picture, we all recognize that, hey, you know what? They're all tools. Just like anyone that's been an EMT or paramedic, you don't just put a non-breather on everybody. You may put a nasal cannula on them, maybe a bag valve mask, maybe no oxygen at all. We are provided a lot of tools, a lot of equipment, a lot of resources that good leaders recognize that not one thing fits every situation. Yeah, I'm a fan of smoothbores. Yeah, I'm a fan of all the cool traditional stuff. But I think that's the key of recognizing that each person can provide some different perspectives. And sometimes the best perspective is the ones that you're not even expecting. So long story short, some good little thoughts there. And it's given me some, ideas. I'm always full of ideas, but some good thoughts from a variety of different people from around the country, that some names you may recognize, some names you may not recognize. But again, it's not about the names. It's, I think, some good content within there.
And a lot of good thoughts in the entire book, Courage Under Fire Leadership. Good thoughts on personal leadership, personnel leadership, fireground leadership, firehouse leadership, and administrative leadership to go along with those tips from some well-known and maybe not well-known fire service leaders out there. I highly encourage the listeners to grab a copy of this book, as well as the one we're going to discuss on our next show, 101 Tips to Ace Your Promotional Exam. Again, in our volunteer departments, your exam could be your election or the board meeting, right? Or the board meeting if they're looking to appoint somebody. But most likely in most volunteer departments, your promotional exam is your election. And I love that book. We're going to talk about it on the next show or in one of the next shows, because as I read through it, there are so many tips that apply 100% to the volunteer fire service. And folks, if you're an officer, you should always want to get better. And part of being an officer is developing into a good leader. You should never take that appointment or win the election and think it's over. No, you got to continuously develop and want to get better. We can always get better. We're going to talk about some things you can do to ace your next promotional exam or volunteer fire department election or appointment. Chief, if they want to get a hold of you, the listeners, if they want copies of your book, how can they reach out and get a hold of you and talk to you more? Because I know you have so much more good advice and things to talk about.
Well, Chief, thank you for closing it that way. Easiest thing, two easy things. You can go to Fire Engineering Books, fireengineeringbooks.com. They've got a great wealth of library of different books for all different people. I mean, your book is in there, Chief. There's tons of great stuff. God, I mean, I was just so stoked when I was at FDIC at the bookstore looking at all this stuff going, oh my gosh. But anyway, they can go to fireengineeringbooks.com to get both my books there. To get a hold of me, you can try to Google my last name, but there's not a lot of Prziborowskis out there, so probably come back to me. But I created a website about 15 years ago that I tried to keep pretty simple, but Code 3 Fire Training, 3 the number, Code 3 Fire Training, all one word.com, code3firetraining.com, or just search Steve Prziborowski. On my website, code3firetraining.com, is a lot of resources for anybody from any type of department. I've got a free stuff page on there. Also got access to my books and everything else to the fire engineering site from there and my other self-published books. But code3firetraining.com is a free stuff link. A lot of leadership stuff, officer development stuff, promotional preparation stuff, presentations I've done, a lot of links to articles I've done with fire engineering, documents I've published, a lot of other resources that I think are valuable, a couple hundred YouTube videos off my YouTube channel for getting hired, getting promoted, or just leadership in general. So a whole plethora of stuff that can, at least if you go to code3firetraining.com, you'll access my social media accounts there. I'm on Instagram, my name, Facebook, X or Twitter, LinkedIn, the usual suspects, and YouTube, obviously. And my cell phone is on there too. And it is amazing that sometimes people will reach out and maybe I'll pick up the phone or I'll respond to a text or an email and they'll be like, wow, you responded or you got back to me. Okay, I put my number on there or my contact information for a reason. I'm a resource. I may not be able to get back to you right away, but I'll at least let you know that, hey, give me a couple days. I'm traveling or teaching or whatever else. That's the benefit of today's modern world, is some of the best fire service people that are out there that I know and some that I don't even know personally. Social media has made it so acceptable, along with the internet, and accessible to people to just reach out. And we'll talk about when we talk about my 101 Tips book, is there's about 40 different fire engineering and FDIC people that helped contribute a couple pages to there that we'll talk more about. Most of them I knew pretty well. Some I didn't know, but through social media, just reaching out to people. So for anyone out there, if there's anything I can ever do for you, I'm a resource. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I mean, there was a guy that I had a 4-hour drive a couple weeks ago in the Midwest going from one point A to point B. And I remember someone had actually just called me and was like, is this a good time to talk? I'm like, well, yeah. I go, we talked for like an hour and a half. He goes, you don't know me, but I've seen some of your stuff. I've read one of your books and I got some questions about getting promoted. And we talked for like an hour and a half. And he's like, I'm so sorry, Impact you. I go, I just had a 4-hour drive that I killed and it was perfect. So please reach out if I can be a resource, or connect with me at FDIC or just whatever. Or if not, that's fine too. But I'm a resource and I'm here to help people.
And you are a treasure. You really are. You are just killing it. And if someone wants to meet you, the other option for them is just find a concert or a ball game and probably find you. I cannot believe the travels that you are always undertaking. You're amazing, and I'm proud to know you. And I think you're doing great stuff. And like I said, thank you for these books. I haven't put them down since I got them. And like the notes, I got notes. I'm a note taker and a highlighter. So thank you so very much for taking the time to be on my podcast. It means the world to me.
You're welcome, brother. It means a lot to me too. So the feelings are mutual. I'm glad we've gotten to know each other over the years. I'm glad for the opportunity now. And it's just awesome. So I wish we had more time at FDIC. Unfortunately, that whole week, as we all know, is sometimes some years, or you're there all the time, and then others like, I didn't even see you there. And just an awesome but a challenging week. But always enjoy spending time with you when we get the chance.
Great. So thanks again. And for anyone who would like to reach out to me personally, again, my contact information, my email, don't laugh. Again, it's AOL, TAMerrill63 at AOL.com. My kids make fun of it all the time. Check out my Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page, my Instagram, Twitter, or X, whatever it's called today, and my website, where I list all my classes and podcasts and articles are all on there. And if anyone would like a copy of my book, The Professional Volunteer Fire Department, Fire Engineering Books and Videos, if you want a signed copy, reach out to me. But again, thank you so much for listening in. My next show will be Tuesday, July 16th. Yes, July 16th. Time is marching by. We are definitely going to have the chief back on to talk about that book, 101 Tips to Ace Your Firehouse Election. And if it's not that show, it'll be the one right close to after that. But I will be in touch on that. But anyway, thanks for listening in. And always remember, again, people, that true professionalism is never defined by a paycheck. And your residents are owed professional service delivered by professional firefighters representing a professional organization. Take care, folks.
Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology. Only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Over time, those toxins lead to cancer. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes. To get free grant assistance, visit magnagrip.com.